samsaradava nalalita loka dhanaya karuna dhanadhanata samsaradava nalalita loka dhanaya karuna ganaganatam samsaradava nalalita loka Praptasya karana gunarnavasa Vande urashi charanaravindam Mahaprabhu kirtana nritya gita Vaditramadyan manasorasena Romanchakam Pashutaranga Pajo Vande urashi charanaravindam Sivigrahara dana nitya nana Shingara Tammantira Marjanado Yutasya Bhaktam Chaniyunja Topi Vande urashi charanaravindam Chaturvidashi Bhagavad Prasada Sadhana Triptan Haribhakta Sangham Kriteva Triptim Bhajathasa Vande urashi charanaravindam Siradhika Madhavayorapara Madhurya Lila Gunarupa Namnam Patishanasa Tanalolupasa Vande urashi charanaravindam Nikunjayu radikere sitai Yayari peyuktera pesaniya Tatrati daksha tativala phasa Vande urashi charanaravindam Sashatharitena samasta shastre Uttasthatha bhaviteva sadhi Kintu Prabhoya Priyeva Tasya Vande Uroshi Charanara Yasya prasada bhagavat prasado Yasya prasada nagati kutopi Yayastu vamstasa yashasti sandhyan Vande Guru Shri Charanara-vindam Vande Guru Shri Charanara-vindam Vande Guru Shri Charanara-vindam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pisthaya Bhutare Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachatya Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Haraya Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha Hare Haraya Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha Gopa Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudan Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohana Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita Shri Rupa Sanatan Pata Raghunatha Jiva Gopal Pata Dasa Raghunatha Jnananda Jiva Gopala Pata Dasa Shri Rupa Sanatana Pata Raghunatha Jiva Gopala Pata Dasa Raghunatha Jiva Gopala Pata Dasa Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Nila Madhurata Nila Madhurate Jaya Radha Nila Madhurata Nila Madhurate Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadra Jaya Sudarshan Chakra Jaya Sitaram 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 Jaya Lakshmana Hanuman Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Guru Deva Guru Deva Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Nitai Gora Haribo 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 Nitai Gora Haribo Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramhamsa Paritaka Acharya Ashtota Shatashi Shrimati Divine Grace Aparchana Rinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya, BBT founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramhamsa Paritaka Acharya Ashtota Shatashi Shrimati Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Premisa Pro Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shate Gadadhar Srivasade Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Shri Yamuna Devi Ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Devi Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinda Ki Jai. All glory to assembled devotees. All glory to assembled devotees. All glory to assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Prahaladadayine. Hiranyakashipurvakshaha. Shilatankanakalaye. Ito nrasimha parato nrasimho. Yeta yeto yami tatom narsimha. Bahi narsimha hrudaye narsimha. Narasimhamadim sharanam prapaje. Tava karakamalavarena kam adbhuta shrangam dalita hiranyakashipu tanubringa keshavadrita narahari rupa jai jagadisha hare. Jai Jagadisha Hare. Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Keshavadrita narahari rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare. Jai Jagadisha Hare. Jai Jagadisha Hare. Jaya Narasimha Dev, Jaya Narasimha Dev, Jaya नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय भक्त प्रहलाद जय 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 प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव नरसिंहदेव भगवान की प्रहलाद महाराज की जय।
वृंदाय तुलसी देव्याय प्रियाय केशवसचा विष्णु भक्ति पदे देवी सत्यवत्याय नमो नमः। वृंदाय तुलसी देव्याय प्रियाय केशवसचा विष्णु भक्ति पदे देवी सत्यवत्याय नमो नमः। विष्णु भक्ति पदे देवी सत्यवत्याय नमो नमः।
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो ये अभिलाषे राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो ये अभिलाषे राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो ये अभिलाषे राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो अभिलाषे जे तुम्हार शरण लय तर वांछ पूर्ण होय जे तुम्हार शरण लय तर वांछ पूर्ण होय कृपा करे करो तारे वृंदावन बासी कृपा करे करो तारे वृंदावन बासी मोराए अभिलाष विलास कुंजे दियो वा मोराए अभिलाष विलास कुंजे दियो वा माया ने हेरिबो सदा जुगल रूपरासी नायाने हेरिबो सदा जुगल रूपरासी ये निवेदनाधारो सखिरानुगत करो ये निवेदनाधारो सखिरानुगत करो सेवाधिकारा दिए करो निज दासी करो निज दासी बिना कृष्ण दासे को ये जन्म रहो कृष्ण दासे को ये जन्म रहो श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये नबासी श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये नबासी राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये नबासी नामो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नामो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नामो नमः यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणं पदे पदे निकानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणं पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणं पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणं पदे पदे तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणं हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Vrinde Devi, Jaya Vrinde Devi, Jaya Vrinde Devi, Jaya Vrinde Devi, Vrinde Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Nittai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nittai Gaura Hari Bol, Nittai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nittai Gaura Hari Bol, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev. वृंदाय तुलसीदेवी प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्ति प्रतिदेवी सत्यवते नमो नमः। वृंदाय तुलसीदेवी प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्ति प्रतिदेवी सत्यवते नमो नमः। वृंदाय तुलसीदेवी प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्ति प्रतिदेवी सत्यवते नमो नमः। वृंदाय तुलसीदेवी प्रियाय केशवस्य विष्णुभक्ति प्रतिदेवी सत्यवते नमो। वृंदाय तुलसीदेवी प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णुभक्ति प्रतिदेवी सत्यवते नमो नमः।
Beloved Krishna, I bow down before you again and again. My desire is to obtain the service of Shri Radha Krishna. Whoever Krishna under you has a wish to feel, bestow mercy upon him, you make him a resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you also grant me residence in the treasure grove of Sri Vrindavan town. Thus within my vision I shall behold the beautiful Sasana Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of the contempt of further. Please sing the devotional
Te Namaha. Namine Guru Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Guru Vibhava Bhumestvam Desta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhuma Sri Jagannatha Te Namaha. Vakaptura Yascha Kripas Sindhu Devacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Gadayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Guru Chase Namaha Panchatatvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhaktasaktikam. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Visakanta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanustute Devi Pranamamohano Divyat Vindaranya Kalpoturavana Masanastito Shrimad Radha Srila Govinda Devo Prestali Vihi Sevyamanus Marami Shriman Rasa Rasaram Vivam Sivata Tatastita Karsan Venus Maner Gopir Gopinatak Striyestana Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Shri Guru Pranam prayers ki jai. Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai. Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarvakarana Karadam Chintamani Prakarta Sadma Sukalpa Riksha Laksavriti Susurabir Abhipali Antam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambrama Sevyamanam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Kranandam Arvinda Dalayataksham Barhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandarpa Koti Kamaniya Vishesha Sobam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kala Sadvana Malyavamsi Ratnam Gadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shaman Tribanga Lalita Nita Prakasam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananyasya Sakalendriya Vritti Manti Pasyanti Pantika Yanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purisham Navayovanam Cha Vede Sadurlabam Aturlabam Atma Bhakto Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Pantasta Koti Satavatsada Sampragamyo Vayo Ratapi Manaso Munipungamanam So Pyasti Yatma Padasimya Vichintya Tatve Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Eko Pyasora Chaitum Jagadanda Kotim Yas Chakti Rasti Jagadanda Chaya Yadanta Andanta Rasta Paramanu Chayanta Rastam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Bhava Bhavita Dio Manajasta Taiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusa Suktar Yameva Nikama Pratitaistuvanti Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasapati Bhavi Tabirya Eva Nicharupa Tayakalabi Goloka Eva Nivasata Kilatma Bhuto Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santaksa Deva Hidesa Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Guna Swarupam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Murti Sukalani Menatistan Navatar Makarod Bhuvane Sukintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramam Pumam Yo Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasya Prabha Pavavato Jagadanda Koti Koti Svasesu Vasudadi Vibhuti Binam Tad Brahma Niskalam Anantam Asesa Bhutam Govindam Adipurisham tamaham bhajami maya hiyasya jagadanda satani sute trigun yatad vishay veda vidayamanam Sattva valambi parasatvam visuddha sattvam govindam adipurisham tamaham bhajami ananda chinmaya rasat mataya manasuya praninam patifalam smaratam upetya lila yatena bhuvanani jaya yajasram govindam adipurisham tamaham bhajami goloka namni nijadamni tale chatasya devi mahesu haridama sutesu tesu Tete Prabhava Nichaya Vitrasya Yena Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Shristi Stati Pralaya Sadhava Sakti Reka Chayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vibharti Durga Ichanu Rupam Apiyasya Chichestate Sa Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Shiram Yatada Divikara Visasya Yoga Sanjayate Nahitata Pritakasti Hetu Yasambhutam Apitata Samapaitikarya Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Deeparcha Devhita Santanam Abhyapetya Deepayate Vivita Hetu Samanu Dharma Yastadra Geva Hicha Vishnu Taya Vibhati Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yakarna Narna Vajale Bhajatisma Yoga Nidram Ananta Jagadanta Saroma Kupa Adhara Satamavam Lamya Param Swamurtim Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasyaika Nisvasitakala Matavalambya Jivanti Loma Villaja Jagadanda Nata Vishnu Mahansa Yasya Kalavisesa Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Basman Yatasma Sakadesu Nijesu Tejasviyam Kiyat Prakatayat Apitadvadatra Brahmaya Esa Jagadanda Vidanu Karta Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Pada Pala Vyugam Vinidai Kumbha Dvande Pranama Samayesa Ganadi Raja Vignan Vihantam Alamasya Jagatrayasya Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Agnir Mahika Ganamambu Marudisascha Kalasta Tatma Manasiti Jagatrayasya Yani Yasmad Bhavanti Vibhavanti Visanti Amcha Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yaschak Suresa Savita Sakalagrahanam Raja Samasta Suramurti Rasesa Teja Yasyagaya Brahmati Sambrita Kala Chakro Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Dharmo Tapapa Nichaya Sutayastapamsi Brahma Dikita Patagava Deyasta Jiva Yadata Matra Vibhava Prakata Prabhava Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yastrindra Gopa Matavendra Mahosva Karma Bandhan Rupa Falabhaja Matanoti Karmani Nirdhati Kintu Jabakti Bhajam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yam Krodha Kama Sahaja Pranayadi Bitti Vatsalya Moha Guru Goro Vasevya Bhava Sanchintya Tasya Sadvisim Taramapurete Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpataravo Jumabo Mischintam Aniganame Itoyam Amritam Kataganam Natyam Gamanam Apivamsi Priyasaki Chirinandam Jati Param Apitadasvadyam Apicha Sayatra Shiradi Bihi Shavadi Sarabi Vyascha Sumahan Nimesar Dakyova Rajati Nahiyatra Pisamaya Bhaje Svita Dvipam Tamaham Ihugolakam Itiyam Vidantas Te Santakshiti Virachara Katipaye Shri Guru Vastaka Prayers Ki Jai. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as a cloud pours water on a forest fire to extinguish it. So the spiritual master extinguishes the blazing fire of material existence by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence. I offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of such spiritual master who is an ocean of auspicious qualities, chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments. The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because he is relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind, sometimes his hair stands on end, he feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes like waves. I offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always engaged in a temple worship of Shri Radha and Krishna. He also engages his disciples in such worship. They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, clean their temple, and perform other similar worship of the Lord. I offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food, analyzed as that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sung. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavad Prasada, he is satisfied. I offer my respectful obeisance to the lotus feet of such spiritual master. The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava and their qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert at assisting the gopis who at different times made different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavan. I offer my most humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he is the most confidential servant to the Lord. This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such spiritual master as the bona fide representative of Shri Hare Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master. At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master. His divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Grantha Raja Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 3, Text number 28. Anam Choru Rasam Tebhyo Tatva Bhagavat Arpanam Goviparta Sabha Suraha Pranemur Bhuvimur Dabhihi. Anam, foodstuff. Cha, also. Ururasam, highly delicious. Tebhya, unto the brahmanas. Tatva, after supplying. Bhagavat Arpanam, which was first offered to the personality of Godhead. Go, cows. Vipra, brahmanas. Artha, purpose. Asava, purpose of living. Sura, all the valiant Kshatriyas. Pranemu, offered obeisances. Bhuvi, touching the ground. Murdabhi, with their heads. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Thereafter they offered the brahmanas highly delicious foodstuffs, first offered to the personality of Godhead, and offered their respectful obeisances by touching their heads to the ground. They lived perfectly by protecting the cows and the brahmanas. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The behavior exhibited by the descendants of Yadu in the pilgrimage site of Prabhasa was highly cultured and exactly to the point of human perfection. The perfection of human life is attained by following 3 principles of civilization: protecting the cows, maintaining the Brahminical culture, and above all, becoming a pure devotee of the Lord. Without becoming a devotee of the Lord, one cannot perfect one's human life. The perfection of human life is to be elevated to the spiritual world, where there is no birth, no death, no disease, and no old age. That is the highest perfectional aim of human life. Without this aim, any amount of material advancement in so-called comforts can only bring the defeat of the human form of life. Brahmanas and Vaishnavas do not accept any foodstuff which is not first offered to the personality of Godhead. Foodstuff offered to the Lord is accepted by the devotees as the mercy of the Lord. After all, the Lord supplies all kinds of foodstuff, both to the human being and to other animals. A human being must be conscious of the fact that all foodstuffs, namely grains, vegetables, milk, water, etc., the prime necessities of life, are supplied for mankind by the Lord, and such foodstuffs cannot be manufactured by any scientist or materialist in a laboratory or factory established by human effort. The intelligent class of men are called Brahmanas, and those who have realized the absolute truth in His supreme personal feature are called Vaishnavas. But Both of them accept foodstuffs, which are the remnants of sacrifice. Sacrifice is ultimately meant to satisfy the Yajna Purusha Vishnu. In Bhagavad Gita 3.13, it is said that one who accepts foodstuffs as the remnants of sacrifice is freed from all sinful reactions. And one who cooks foodstuffs for maintenance of the body takes in all kinds of sins, which lead only to suffering. The foodstuffs prepared by the Yadus at the Prabhasa pilgrimage site to offer to the bona fide brahmanas there were all offered to the personality of Godhead Vishnu. The Yadus offered their sincere obeisances by touching their heads to the ground. The Yadus, or any enlightened family in Vedic culture, are trained for attainment of human perfection by total cooperation of service between the different divisions of social orders. The word udurasam is also significant here. Hundreds of delicacies can be prepared simply by the combination of grains, vegetables, and milk. All such preparations are in the mode of goodness, and therefore may be offered to the personality of Godhead. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 9.26, the Lord accepts only foodstuffs which are within the range of fruits, flowers, leaves, and liquids, provided they are offered to complete devotional service. Offered in complete devotional service. Devotional service is the only criterion for a bona fide offering to the Lord. The Lord assures that he positively eats such foodstuffs offered by the devotees. So judging from all sides, the Yadus were perfectly trained civilized persons, and their being cursed by the Brahmana sages was only by the desire of the Lord. The whole incident was a warning to all concerned that no one should behave lightly with Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the third canto, third chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Lord's Pastimes Out of Vrindavana. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Thereafter, they offered the Brahmanas highly delicious foodstuffs, first offered to the personality of Godhead, and offered their respectful obeisances by touching their heads to the ground. They lived perfectly by protecting the cows and the Brahmanas. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So, here's an explanation of how to attain perfect, let's say, the perfection of human life. And Prabhupada names three things. First is the protection of cows. Now, today what people say, this is not important. That's what Cardinal Daniel said to Prabhupada. This is not so important. Why waste our time talking about this? Let's talk about something more substantive. And Prabhupada said, no. Thou shalt not kill. He said, no. That doesn't mean animals. It means only human beings. Well, we've explained how that happened to become shastric for the Catholics. It was a slippery slope begun by Aristotle, and then Augustine, then Origen, and then finally, what's his name? Aquinas. So this has led to the codification that life does not start until conception in the womb, and that animals do not have a soul. Therefore, they can be killed and eaten. They're meant to serve humanity, and so forth. So this has caused a lot of misery in the Catholic Church. We see how they have difficulty controlling their priests, who degrade into all kinds of sinful activities. Not all of them, of course, but a lot of them. They have a special camp for alcoholic priests, and many priests have become child molesters, and the priests regularly drink wine. So there's a lot of things, and then they artificially try to maintain celibacy. So, not that all priests are like that, but a lot of them. So this has plagued the Catholic Church since they fixed their dogma based on false information. Okay, so the first and foremost thing is protecting cows. And then secondly is maintaining the Brahminical culture. And third is becoming pure devotees of the Lord. These are the three perfections of human life. And they can be, this is the perfection of human life, attained by these three qualifications. So now we see what Prabhupada gave us in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness is the perfection, for the perfection of human life. And we protect cows, we try and protect the Brahminical culture, and we're trying to become pure devotees of the Lord. So Prabhupada has introduced us to the Lord, Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's given us the process by which we can serve the Lord through devotional service. And if we do that sincerely, then eventually we'll develop pure love for Krishna and go back to Godhead. Sankalpa, Prayojana, Abhideya, and Prayojana are the three steps of purification. So, this is given to us freely by Srila Prabhupada. He doesn't charge money for this. It's not like some gurus, they charge you money to get a secret mantra for yourself. There's one of our devotees who was an initiated Brahmana, and he got bewildered by Mahesh Yogi. And he quit Krishna consciousness and paid $700 to get a personal mantra from the so-called guru. So after a couple of years, I met him, and I said, Prabhu, what's happening? I haven't seen you for a long time. He said, oh, no, I joined up with the Maharishi. I said, oh, did you pay for your mantra? He said, yeah. I said, what's your mantra? He said, I can't tell you, it's a secret. Come on, I said, you know who I am. I'm not going to tell anybody else. Why don't you tell me what your mantra is? He said, no, I'm not going to tell you. I said, come on. So finally he agreed to tell me. I said, what's your mantra? He said, Nishringa. I said, what? Nishringa? Prabhupada taught you the whole Nishringa mantra, and you paid $700 just for the first word? Are you crazy? He said, oh, I knew you were going to make fun of me. I said, I'm not making fun of you. I'm just telling you what you've been cheated. You got the whole Nishringa mantra, and you paid $700 just to get the word Nishringa. He said, you've gone nuts. And this is a true story. You see how people love to be cheated. And he abandoned Prabhupada and went to this phony. So this is the sad state of the human condition today. But Prabhupada has given us a chance to perfect our human life and go back to Godhead. So if we simply believe what Prabhupada has said, and all he's doing is repeating what the acharyas have said, and all they're doing is repeating what Krishna has said without any alteration, then that means that we can perfect our life in this, even in one lifetime, and go back to Godhead. So there are a lot of information in these verses that we've been covering the last couple of days, and make a little bit of a summary of what we've learned. First of all, there's an interesting thing. It's called the threes. So, for example, there are a bunch of threes that are important. Like, for example, there is the Prakriti, Jiva, and Brahman. Those are three things explained in the 13th chapter, 3rd verse. In other words, the Brahman is the field of activity. So Prakriti, or Brahman, is the field of activity. And Jiva, the individual soul, is also Brahman and is trying to control the material nature. And the Brahman means Krishna, the controller of both Prakriti and Jiva. He is the real controller. So these are three Brahman conceptions of life explained in the 13th chapter, 3rd verse. So that's a sequence of three things, right? In other words, Prakriti is also Brahman, the material nature. In other words, spiritual, right? And then the jiva is also Brahman, but the jiva is unfortunately trying to control the material nature. And then Krishna is the supreme Brahman. He's the controller of both Prakriti and the jiva. Then we have the three modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. Then we have three miseries: Adi, Admika, Adi, Bodhika, Adi, Daivika. Then we have three Vishnus: Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, and Kshirodakshay Vishnu. Then we have Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana. Three steps to perfection: being introduced to Krishna, engaging in devotional service for Krishna, and eventually through pure devotional service attaining pure love of Krishna. Then we have three times: past, present, and future. And then we have Sat, Chit, and Ananda, three transcendental qualities, including Satchitananda and Vigraha, in the form of the Supreme Personality Godhead. Then we have the three doors to hell: lust, anger, and greed. And then we have the word Aum. A refers to Krishna, U to Radharani, and to the living entity. And this is in the Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, chapter 20. And then we have Om Tat Sat. Om is surrender to Krishna, and which is the objective of devotional service, and Tat, freedom from material desires, and Sat, serving the Lord and the Lord's devotees. And then we have sacrifice, penance, and charity. In other words, yagya, tapa, and dana. And then, so these are sequences of threes that are significant to understanding Krishna consciousness. Now, also in the Bhagavad Gita, it's explained that there's two major subjects of the Bhagavad Gita. So there are also sequences of 2, sequences of 4, sequences of 5, sequences of 6. So, but this is an important thing, that there are two, what you would call, subjects of Bhagavad Gita. They are Tyaga and Sannyasa. So what does Tyaga mean? Tyaga means giving up the results of all activities. And Sannyasa, what does Sannyasa mean? It means giving up activities that are based on material desires. So, Tyaga is giving up the results of all activities. In other words, offering them to Krishna. And Sannyasa is giving up activities that are based on material desires. So these are the two major subjects of Bhagavad Gita. If you read through it, you'll see that these two things are emphasized throughout the Gita. Okay, so I thought that'd be very interesting to hear about. So, in the last couple of days, we discussed some other very important points, and they are, for example, the what you would call what you call the concept of oneness with the Lord, and also equality. These two things are above prasanatma, and that means being self-satisfied, or realizing the first stage of Brahman realization. So above that comes equality and this concept of oneness with the Lord. Now I want to explain more in depth what that means, concept of oneness with the Lord, because this is misunderstood because of the nonsense of the Mayavadis. And I'm going to give you a practical example of it also. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 9th chapter, verse number 40, it says, "Let my mind be fixed upon Lord Shri Krishna, whose motions and smiles of love attracted the damsels of Rajadharma. the gopis. The damsels imitated the characteristic movements of the Lord after his disappearance from the rasa dance. So, Prabhupada explains, by intense ecstasy and loving service, the damsels of Rajabhumi, or meaning of Vrindavana, attain qualitative oneness with the Lord by dancing with him on an equal level. So, this is a very interesting verse and purport by Prabhupada. It explains the nature of spiritual sex. And then we've been talking about that before. And it definitely has nothing to do with mundane sex. That's one thing we have to understand. Absolutely nothing to do with it. Why? Because people are already eternal in the spiritual world. They don't have to reproduce. Right? And there is a place where Prabhupada says, even if they do engage in some kind of mundane sexual behavior in the spiritual world, there is no childbirth. So, not that that's an excuse for them to do that. And here we see on the highest level the gopis, they do not exist, they do not engage in any kind of mundane sex. No question of that. However, they do experience what you would call in the spiritual world sexual ecstasies. And that is based uniquely on the beauty of Krishna, that puts them in a state of ecstatic, transcendental emotions. So it says, this verse says, 1:940, let my mind be fixed upon Lord Shri Krishna, whose motions and smiles of love attracted the damsels of Rajadama, the gopis. This is spoken by Bhisma Pitamaha, who does not have what you would call a conjugal relationship with Krishna, but he's fully cognizant of it. And he talks about it here. The damsels imitated the characteristic movements of the Lord after his disappearance from the rasa dance. So Prabhupada says, by intense ecstasy in loving service, the damsels of Rajabhumi attained qualitative oneness with the Lord by dancing with him on an equal level, embracing him in nuptial love, smiling at him in joke, and looking at him with a loving attitude. So these are different forms of transcendental, what you would call lusty behavior, but it's not based on mundane lust. There's a difference. Mundane lust, one tries to satisfy their own senses. Transcendental lust, one is only concerned about pleasing Krishna. There's a major difference between the two. And this is explained in Adi Lila chapter 5, where it explains the nature of transcendental love for Krishna. So, the gopis, and I've explained this before, have considered that their body belongs to Krishna. Their everything belongs to Krishna. And therefore, whatever they do in preparation of seeing Krishna is simply to please him. They have no desire for sense gratification themselves. And of course, this is explained by the last verse of the Shiksastakam, Aslisava Padaratam Pinastamam. So the devotee is not interested in any way of pleasing their own senses. They're only interested in pleasing Krishna. And Krishna can do anything to them, and they will not complain about it, and they will not become discouraged. They will always be ready to do anything and everything to please the Lord, and go to any extreme to do that. Okay, so by intense ecstasy and loving service, the damsels of Rajabhumi attained qualitative oneness with the Lord by dancing with him on an equal level. This is above, it's even more advanced than Arjuna's relationship with Krishna. And of course, the Brahmajyoti realization is not, it doesn't even come close to what we're talking about. Right? So the Mayavadis and the few of them who do attain Brahman realization, merging into Brahman, whatever they experience is nothing compared to what the gopis are experiencing. Right? By intense ecstasy and loving service, the damsels of Rajabuni attained qualitative oneness with the Lord by dancing with him on an equal level. That's point one. Embracing him in nuptial love, smiling at him in joke, and looking at him with a loving attitude. Like, for example, this example of the hunchback lady who developed lusty desires for Krishna. So to satisfy her, Krishna embraced her. And as soon as she was embraced by the Lord, her lusty desires went away, and she developed pure love for the Lord. See, that is what is meant by a nuptial, embracing the Lord in nuptial love. Nuptial means husband and wife relationship. So when the Lord does sometimes embrace the devotees, the gopis, they feel this transcendental ecstasy just by coming in contact with the body of the Lord, or seeing him, or seeing the different facial movements of the Lord, or bodily movements of the Lord. They become overwhelmed with ecstasies. Smiling at him in joke, and looking at him with a loving attitude. So that's when they feel intense ecstasies. The relation of the Lord with Arjuna is undoubtedly praiseworthy for devotees like Bhismadeva, but the relation of the gopis with the Lord is still more praiseworthy because of their still more purified loving service. By the grace of the Lord, Arjuna was fortunate enough to have the fraternal service of the Lord as a chariot driver, but the Lord did not award Arjuna with equal strength. The gopis, however, practically became one with the Lord by attainment of equal footing with the Lord. Bhisma's aspiration to remember the gopis is a prayer to have their mercy also at the last stage of his life. The Lord is satisfied more when his pure devotees are glorified, and therefore Bhismadev has not only glorified the acts of Arjuna, his immediate object of attraction, but has also remembered the gopis, who were endowed with unrivaled opportunities for rendering loving service to the Lord. The gopis' equality with the Lord should never be misunderstood to be like the Sayuja liberation of the impersonalists. The equality is one of perfect ecstasy, where the differential conception is completely eradicated for the interests of the lover, and the beloved become identical. So this is a very short purport, but it has huge implications to it. And if we try and understand this, then we can see the difference between mundane sex in the material world and this transcendental so-called, it's also referred to as lust in the spiritual world, but it has nothing to do with mundane lust. And it says the gopis' equality with the Lord should never be misunderstood to be like the Sayuja liberation of the impersonalists. The equality is one of perfect ecstasy, where the differential conception, so differential conception means you identify yourself as different than the Lord. Just like when people identify themselves as being the body, that's a differential conception. But when you identify yourself as having an eternal soul, which is part and parcel of Krishna, there's no longer a differential conception. However, that qualitative oneness does not imply quantitative oneness. So there still is some kind of differential there, but it's not material. It's accepting our constitutional position as subordinate to the Lord. So we are coexistent with the Lord because we are eternal. That means existing in the past, the present, and the future. In other words, existing in all time and in all frames of reference. So we are co-equal as far as eternity goes. But there is some differential because of our constitutional position as subordinate to the Lord. So we'll never be equal to him in knowledge, but we can participate in his transcendental knowledge, and we'll never be equal to him in ecstasy because his ecstasy is always increasing, but we can participate in it. See? So, this is what's called equality. Now, the equality of the gopis is greater than the equality that we're experiencing. Our equality is we're eternal and coexisting eternally with the Lord. And we're participating in His ever-increasing knowledge and ever-increasing ecstasy. But the gopis actually are even greater than us because they're experiencing, dancing with the Lord, embracing the Lord, and so forth. Okay, so that's very interesting. Now, this concept of oneness continues in the first chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 7th chapter, 5th verse, where it says, the Srimad Bhagavatam is the summum bonum remedy for suffering humanity. In other words, summum bonum, the greatest panacea or cure for suffering humanity in the clutches of Maya. Srila Vyasadeva, therefore, first of all, diagnosed the actual disease of the conditioned souls, that is, they're being illusioned by the external energy. He also saw the perfect Supreme Being from whom the illusory energy is far removed, though he saw both the disease-conditioned souls and also the cause of the disease, and the remedial measures are suggested in the next verse. So this is 175. 176 explains how to cure all the problems of life. Both the Supreme Personality Godhead and the living beings are undoubtedly qualitatively one. Yeah, they're both eternal, and we are part and parcel of the Lord. But the Lord is the controller of the illusory energy, whereas the living entity is controlled by the illusory energy, or can be controlled by the illusory energy. Thus, the Lord and the living beings are simultaneously one and different. Another point, so that's our philosophy, right? Achintya Beda Abeda Tattva. There's inconceivably, and it means one is inconceivably and simultaneously one and different from the Lord. Another point is distinct herein, that eternal relation between the Lord and the living being is transcendental. Otherwise, the Lord would not have taken the trouble to reclaim the conditioned souls from the clutches of Maya. So we all have an eternal relationship with Krishna. If we did not, then Krishna wouldn't waste his time trying to save us. But because we have an eternal relationship with Krishna, Krishna is more interested in us coming back to Godhead than we are. We're not so interested in going back to Godhead because of bodily attachments. Just like Arjuna was not interested in following Krishna's order because while he was in this illusion of identifying with his family. But as soon as Krishna cured him of that false attachment to his family, he agreed to follow Krishna's instruction. So all of us are very hesitant about going back to Godhead because we're very strongly attached to things in the material world. But when we become strongly attached to Krishna, then we don't hesitate to follow his orders and follow his instructions. So we see that this reluctance to follow Krishna is ingrained in the living entity due to identification with the body and the extensions of the body, such as family, ethnicity, race, and so forth. And we see how significant this attachment to race and ethnicity is today. Like in the case of the Ukrainians and the Russians, they're basically the same people in culture, and language, and so many ways, and religion. But yet they're killing each other, right? Based on false identification. And, Putin says that, well, we're the same people. We have the same religion. We have the same culture. And the Ukrainian says, that's not true. We're not like you guys, So, although they have the same church, the same belief, etc. So we see how the material attachment to the body is so strong that in spite of so many similarities, they're killing each other and they hate each other. whereas before they were allies, and they worked with each other. So this is very, very sad. And it's on every level. The Telanganas and the Andhras, the Palestinians and the Jews. We can go down a list, right? A huge list. And it's always the same thing. You know, even in China, there's different sort of identification of the Chinese. You know, you have mainland Chinese and you have Taiwan Chinese. Same people, same language, same culture. They hate each other. They're going to kill each other. So this is going on all over the world on all different levels. So it says, both the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living beings are undoubtedly qualitatively one, but the Lord is the controller of the illusory energy, whereas the living entity is prone to be controlled by the illusory energy. Thus the Lord and the living beings are simultaneously one and different. Another point is distinct herein, that eternal relation between the Lord and the living being is transcendental. Otherwise the Lord would not have taken the trouble to reclaim the conditioned souls from the clutches of Maya. In the same way, the living entity is also required to revive his natural love and affection for the Lord, and that is the highest perfection of the living entity. Srimad Bhagavatam treats the conditioned soul with the aim to that goal of life, that is, going back to Godhead. So then there's the principle called Sarvam Klav Idam Brahma, from the Chandogya Upanishad. And the understanding of this is that basically it's saying Sarvam Klavidam Brahma, everything is Brahman. So what does that mean exactly? It means that Lord Krishna is the supreme absolute truth. The famous atheist Kapila Muni propagated the Sankhya philosophy. So there's two Kapilas now. There's the false Kapila that he's talking about right now, and then there's the real Kapila, who is the son of Devahuti and what's her husband, Kardama Muni. And he's an incarnation of Krishna, right? Who taught the real Sankhya. But there's, in modern times, there's a false Kapila Muni who taught the atheistic Sankhya. And that's what most people in India consider as the philosophy of Sankhya, the atheistic Sankhya. There are big, thick books like this in libraries of the atheistic Sankhya by Kapila Muni. So you can get easily confused because it's the same name as Kapila Muni, the son of Devahuti. So Prabhupada talks about the atheist Kapila first, who propagated Sankhya philosophy. He concluded that the material world consists of 24 material elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, and ether, form, taste, smell, sound, and touch, eyes, tongue, nose, ears, and skin, mouth, hands, legs, anus, and genitals, mind, intelligence, and false ego, and the unmanifested state of the three modes of material nature, the pradhana. So these are the 24 material elements. When Kapila, the false Kapila, was unable to perceive the unmanifested soul after analyzing the 24 elements, he concluded that God does not exist. Thus, the devotee community regards Kapila as an atheist, the false Kapila, right? He was not able to perceive the spirit soul, and if you don't understand that we have an eternal soul that's part and parcel of Krishna, then you don't understand Krishna also. So therefore you become an atheist. So this is what modern scientists are. They're following the false Kapila, where they only recognize material elements. They don't recognize anything spiritual, including the soul and including Krishna. Lord Kapila, the son of Devahuti, is a different person altogether from the agnostic Kapila. Agnostic means he doesn't have any information of the soul or Krishna, therefore he rejects, for the time being, he doesn't believe in it. Lord Kapila is accepted as an empowered incarnation of Supreme Godhead. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna refutes the atheist Kapila's Sankhya philosophy and its contention that the unmanifested soul is non-existent. In the Gita 7.4, the Lord also establishes that the material ingredients are all under his control and supervision. Bhumir apo nalo vayu kam mano buddhirevacha. Ahankara ityam me bina pakritirastata. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, all together these 8 comprise my separated material energies. And those 8 can be expanded further into 24. Who is Lord Krishna, and what is his original form? Unless one knows about his opulence, potencies, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation, one can never enter into the realm of pure devotional service, as stated in the Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila 2.117. Siddhanta Balya Chittina Kara Alasa Iha Haite Krishna Lage Surdridha Manasa. A sincere student should not neglect the discussion of such philosophical conclusions, considering them controversial, for such discussions strengthen the mind. Thus, one's mind become attached to see Krishna. So in other words, when we begin to discuss philosophy, we should not shy away from it, but listen to it very carefully and consider it seriously. So, one who is situated in knowledge of Krishna and acts accordingly is executing devotional service. In pursuing the process initiated by Kapila, man failed, the false Kapila, man failed to fathom the same for hundreds and thousands of years. The Supreme Lord Krishna has, in a few words, lifted the shroud of mystery and revealed the truth. So the false Kapila in Kali Yuga has misled people. Right? So, but Krishna now, in a few words, has lifted the shroud, the covering of mystery, and revealed the truth. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, altogether these 8 constitute my separated material energies. Besides these, O mighty armed Arjuna, there is another superior energy of mine, which comprises the living entities who are exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature. All created beings have their source in these 2 natures, of all that is material and all that is spiritual. In this world, know for certain that I am both the origin and the dissolution. Okay, so this is Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter, 4th and 5th verse. In other words, he's saying that the material nature is inferior spiritual energy, but it's still spiritual, eternal. And the living entity, you and me, are his superior spiritual energy. We belong to the superior spiritual energy of the Lord. But by misidentifying with the body made of matter, we become illusioned. And then we believe that the purpose of life is exploiting the material energy for our sense gratification. Those who cannot understand this truth remain far from the science of devotional service, while those who do understand it are strengthened in their devotional service. Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Male. So when the Supreme Male is present, automatically material nature, his female counterpart, is there to serve him. Those who falsely pose as, so the female counterpart is talking about Prakriti. Prakriti is whatever is controlled by the Lord. So the material nature is controlled by the Lord. The living entities, you and me, are controlled by the Lord. So we are all Prakriti. We're actually female in relationship to the Lord. Those who falsely pose as the Supreme Person claim to have the material nature at their disposal and conclude that nature is no longer at Lord Krishna's beck and calling. Naturally, this is absurd, and only fools would make such a claim. Okay, so this goes on. I'm not going to read the rest of that, but we come to the fundamental part that I want to read. That is 2 important verses in Bhagavad Gita. So far we heard Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter, verse 4 and 5. Now we come to verses 6 and 7, which are extremely important. Etad yoni bhutani sarvanitu padaraya aham krishnasya jagatas prabhava pralayas tata matat parataram nanyat kinchit asti dhananjaya mai sarvam idam protam sutre manigana iva. All created beings have their source in these two natures, meaning the inferior spiritual nature called the material nature, and the superior energies of the Lord, meaning the soul. Of all that is material and all that is spiritual in this world, know for certain that I am both the origin and the dissolution. O conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. So these two verses are very important because they establish what's called Ekam Eva Dvitiyam Brahma, or Brahman is one without a second, or Neha Na Nasti Kinchana. Besides this, nothing else exists. Or Sarvam Klav Idam Brahma. Everything and everywhere is Brahman. So the Sarvam Klav Idam Brahma is a famous Mahavaikya of the Mayavadis, but they misinterpret it. And now we're going to hear the real interpretation of it, that everything and everywhere is Brahman. So, the real meaning of Sarvam Klavidam Brahma, not the false meaning of the Mayavadis, is in these two verses that we just quoted, 7th chapter, 6th and 7th verse. And Prabhupada explains, the Supreme Lord, endowed with 6 transcendental opulences to the absolute degree, is the highest governing principle. Thus, no other personality is equal or greater than he. Lord Krishna confirms this point by saying, there is no truth superior to me, and then explaining how he is present everywhere and intimately connected with everything through his all-pervasive energies. Okay, so now we're going to hear the Mayavadi explanation of Sarvam Klavidam Brahma, given by, let's see, what's his name? 1 second, let me find out. One second. It's in the Chandogya Upanishad, translated by Swami Lokeshwarananda, and it's called Hinduism Vedanta. In other words, it's the Mayavad philosophy. All right. So the same verse, the same Sarvam Klavidam Brahma, which is in the Chandogya Upanishad 3.14.1, by this so-called Swami, and he says, he translates it as this: all this is Brahman. Everything comes from Brahman. Everything goes back to Brahman, and everything is sustained by Brahman. One should therefore quietly meditate on Brahman. Each person has a mind of his own. What a person wills in his present life, he becomes when he leaves this world. One should bear this in mind and meditate accordingly. So his word-for-word definition of Sarvam Klavidam Brahma is the following: Sarvam Idam, all this, Kalu, no doubt, Brahma is Brahman. And the commentary: the word Brahman means the oldest, the biggest. Tejas, fire, Jala, water, and Prithvi, earth, emerged from Brahman in that order. So they are called Taja. Then they disappear in Brahman in the reverse order, so they are called Tala. In the past, in the present, and in the future, they are sustained in Brahman. They are, therefore, one with Brahman. The Upanishads say here to think over this with kratu, that is, with great effort and with deep concentration. Kratu also means will or willpower. It is your will that decides your destiny. So, this is his explanation. Did you hear anything about Krishna? No. He's not talking about Krishna. He's talking about something called Brahman. which is something impersonal. So, this is the tragedy of Brahman, of Mayavad philosophy. They cancel out Krishna. And they just talk about this impersonal state. Now, sometimes they do talk about Krishna, but as being subordinate to Brahman. And when he comes in the material world, he comes in a material body. So they do sometimes talk about Krishna, but the Krishna that they're talking about is not the real Krishna. It's some, what you would call, philosophized Vishnu. And it's their own misinterpretation of Krishna. Okay. So we see that this concept of oneness with the Lord, well, there's a little difference between the oneness of the gopis with the Lord, who come up to an equal stage as the Lord, and the concept of oneness of the jivas like you and me, who are coexistent with the Lord as far as eternity goes, but we can never come up to the level of his knowledge and especially his ecstasies, right? Whereas the gopis can actually participate in those ecstasies to a greater degree than we can, right? But that does not mean that we are eternally limited. It only simply means that we are always going to be subordinate to the Lord. However, we can progress even in the spiritual world, in our different rasas. Okay, so that's another subject. So I just wanted to go over this, what we call concept of oneness with the Lord. We're one in quality, but never in quantity. Okay. So now, I'm going to come back to what we're going to do. What time is it now? Okay, all right. I'll do this tomorrow then. I really want to talk at length about living in the mode of goodness and unite for goodness, because that's going to be the theme of our Ananda Mela, and we're going to begin to talk a little bit about it in the Derby days already. So I'll talk about that tomorrow. Are there any questions?
No, just a comment. I think when you say gopis consider their bodies
belonging to
Krishna, they're actually not considering, they're realizing that is the truth.
Yes.
So we have the duality, whereas they don't have the duality.
We might say it theoretically, but to actually mean it is something else.
Correct. Experientially, it's different.
Yeah, that means that we don't do anything in this body for our own sense gratification. So therefore, you see these two subject matters of Bhagavad Gita, this tyaga and sannyasa. So tyaga means you offer all results to Krishna, right? And sannyasa means you work only for the pleasure of Krishna, right? So this is the theme throughout the whole Bhagavad Gita, that as tyaga is renunciation, give up the results of all activities to offer it to Krishna, and giving up all activities that are based on material desires. So that is the two major subjects of Bhagavad Gita. So are we ready to do that? Well, we're practicing, giving up all activities based on material desires. So this is a huge subject, and you have to really think deeply about it. Like you see, like Prabhupada, at one point he gave everything up. Everything. and just took complete shelter of Krishna. And then he had some problems. Like after he did that, he was bored by a bull in Vrindavan, and he ended up on his back in a hospital with a severe injury. And then he thought, maybe I made a mistake leaving my family. You know? But then he perked up his determination not to give up. And then he went through other problems. You know, he was very poor. He was hardly eating anything, just eating potatoes. That's the only thing he could afford. And he was trying to print his Back to Godhead magazine. He was just eking out the just bare minimum to be able to keep printing it in a few copies and distributing them in Delhi and not having much success at all. And then trying to beg people, give me one of your sons, I'll make him a pure devotee. Nobody gave him a son. And then he had to beg to get a free ticket on a merchant ship, you know. And then he has 2 heart attacks. But somehow he survives, and when he gets finally to New York, he's almost killed by a crazy hippie who's on LSD, who tries to stab him to death, right? And then he has a heart attack. And then he goes back to India to recuperate, and then he comes back again, and then from that point on, the movement started really expanding. And he expanded it tremendously in a few years, and then he left. So we see that he struggled like anything to accomplish his guru's desire, to preach in the Western world, to print so many books and have them distributed and establish a huge movement. So, therefore, the determination to be a devotee, to give up all activities based on sense gratification and offer all results of one's activities to Krishna, that is a very special, let's say, culture called pure devotional service. But that's what he's teaching us. That's what Lord Chaitanya was teaching. So we have to think very deeply about it. You had a question there.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Maharaj, just little more clarification on false Kapila.
Yes.
So false Kapila, is it a philosophy explained by the modern philosophers, or it's a book, or is a person? Like, what is false?
False Kapila was a person.
Person.
Yeah, existing in Kali Yuga. And he writes the whole Sankhya Yoga book, but it misinterprets it and relegates Krishna to being subordinate to the laws of material nature. Okay. So he said, well, yeah, there is some Purusha, he created something, but once he creates, he stands back and the laws of nature take over. Something like that, So he's minimizing the role of. He doesn't even recognize the eternal soul, and so there are two things. One is the atheistic. One is the karma mimamsa, in which the person that preached that said that Krishna creates, but then once he creates, he takes a subordinate position and the laws of material nature take over. Okay, that's not false Kapila. False Kapila doesn't even mention Krishna or the jiva. He only recognizes 24 material elements. Okay. So that is what the modern scientists are doing also. So false Kapila is supporting the modern scientists, right? So he came before them, and they just adopted his philosophy. There's no soul, and there's no God. Okay, we'll stop there. Thank you. Hare Krishna. You see, there's so many interesting things once you get into regularly hearing Bhagavatam. There's so many interesting things. Every day is something going to be new. Haribol. Huh? Yeah. Yeah.
So if you order online, you have to order overnight.
Yeah.
It's going to be expensive cost. Is that okay?
Okay. We can't buy any here in the store.
They're not in bulk. We'll have to limit it to probably be similar cost.
Okay, then do it. Then do it. You were going to order that anyway, right?
Yeah, we looked last night. We ordered, and then they said for it to come tomorrow. The shipping itself is like $160.
Okay, that's all right. That's all right.
And then I'll need the card number, I think.
Okay, I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you right now.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma Bando Moi Savadana Mate Jahara Prasade Bar E Bhava Toriya Jar Krishna Prapti Hoy Jaha Hoy Te Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitite Koriya Kya Arana kori ho mane asha Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Yutama Gati Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asha Chakshudan dilo jai janme janme Prabhu se Chakshudan dilo jai janme janme Prabhu se Divya Gyan Hriday Prakashito Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Avidya Vinasha Jate Videgai Jahara Charito Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adama Janara Bandhu लोकेनाथ लोकेरा जीवाना हा हा प्रभु करो दया देहो मोरे पादचाया एबेजास गुशुक त्रिभुवाना श्रीला प्रभुपाद पतित पावना जय प्रभुपद जय प्रभुपद जय प्रभुपद जय प्रभुपद नमो ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा नित्य गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain pure devotional service. I bow to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. I only wish to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates, by him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and the Lord and master of devotees. O Master, be merciful unto me. Give me the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread all over 3 worlds. We take shelter of your lotus feet, Srila Prabhupada.